Hello and welcome to today's Delta Credit Tip. So you got a call from a debt collector and the conversation just kind of went left. How do you know when you're dealing with a legitimate debt collection company or not? Well, stay tuned, we'll fill you in on today's Delta Credit Tip. Hello and welcome back to today's Delta Credit Tip. So you've been getting these phone calls from this specific debt collector and the conversation just doesn't seem right? How do you know when you're dealing with a legitimate debt collection company and those that are just simply straight out fraud? So we're going to go over some of the cues and some of the things that you want to look for in a conversation, because more than likely they're going to call you. They're not going to put something in writing, so you're going to be under the gun, right? Hopefully this information is helpful. If so, give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that every Thursday, as we come out with new information to help you in your credit restoration process, you get that information as soon as it comes out and you have it in that arsenal. Okay? So let's talk about that phone call you're getting from that debt collector. Now, the one thing that we've discovered about debt collection companies is that just like credit repair companies, they're either legitimate or they're not. And usually when they're not legitimate, it's going to happen one of two ways. They're either going to be fraudulent in their methods or they're going to be fraudulent in their intent. And most often than not, debt collectors are going to be fraudulent in their methods, not necessarily their intent. But we want to kind of pay attention to both. So we're going to kind of highlight some of the things that you need to make sure of as you're going into these conversations. So you get this phone call, okay? And first off, the intro is always weird, right? Either they're going to act like they're a really good friend of yours, or it's just going to be kind of one of those vague things. And you're going to probably get the scam likely on your phone. You're going to know something weird is about to happen, right? Get past the weirdness. That's your opportunity to have a few seconds to prepare yourself, because you're going to answer the phone, you're going to hear complete silence for a few seconds, and then they're going to come on. Well, that just gives you some opportunity to prepare for whatever this person's about to say. Okay? So the first thing you're going to want to do is find out who's calling. Okay? By law, they have to disclose who they are, right? And this is the first thing that you want to know is who is contacting you. If they run through a name real quick or they use acronyms or something that you don't understand, make sure you understand fully who is on the phone. Okay? That's step number one. If it is not a legitimate debt collection company, now they're going to be kind of skittish as to telling you who they are. You're going to immediately get pushback from question number one. And the thing about asking questions is that's usually what's going to be paramount in a conversation that you're having with a debt collector. When it comes to communication, the person that's asking the questions is the person that's controlling the conversation. So as you're going through this conversation with the debt collector, for every comment that you make, end it with a question. That keeps you in control of the conversation, right? Right? Because it elicits a response. Just like when I said right, you probably felt the need to say, yeah, right. That's a normal thing. So keep asking questions till you get all the questions that you need to determine whether or not this is a legitimate debt collector or not. Okay? So again, first step, identify who they are. Almost immediately afterward, they should try to identify you. If they don't care to identify you, that's a second notation or a red flag that this is a fraudulent debt collector, because they can't just discuss your account with anyone. Now, state law will determine whether or not they can talk to spouses and things like that, but if it's specifically for you, then they need to have identified yourself. And when you go to identify yourself, what I'm going to recommend is you give three types of information. You give them your name, you give them your date of birth, you give them the last four digits of your social. I would refrain from giving them your address. And if they give you any pushback as to why you're not giving the address, just say, hey, look, I got kids, or I'm single, or I'm a female. Give her any reason that you want and say, I'm not giving you my address, but here's the other qualifier information. And they should, at that point, go, well, this is an attempt to collect a debt. Anything you say will be used for that purpose. You owe us so much money. How are you going to pay us today? Okay. Well, at that point, you need to go back into question mode. Okay. Because again, you want to be able to control the conversation. So the first thing you want to really go into is who is the original creditor? All right, who are you calling on behalf of? They should have identified that when they said this is an attempt to collect a debt spiel, but you want to know who they're collecting for, and the legitimate debt collectors are going to tell you who they're collecting for. If you don't recognize the account, well, that's again another red flag, right? Because there's debt collectors now that will call just on the lark that you might perhaps have an old account with that creditor and mentally connect the two when there really is no connection, right? You don't have a Barclays card. Why would they be calling to collect on a Barclays card? If they say I'm calling on Barclays and you never had a Barclays card, just hang up. There's no point in me continuing that conversation. Okay. So you want to identify, well, who is the original creditor, and then go to, well, how much do I owe, or how much is claimed that I owe, and then at that point, after they go through that, again, go back to the question mode and say, look, I really don't know what you're talking about, and I'll have to get with my finances to kind of see where I can go with this. Now, the reason you want to say I don't know what you're talking about is because of the statute of limitations. Right? You never want to admit to ownership of a debt, whether you think it's maybe legitimate or not, because of course that could wreak havoc on that statute of limitations, where it may not be a legal obligation to you now, but by admitting ownership of the debt, you then revive that debt, so it's now a zombie debt, and it's chasing after you, yelling brains and all this other stuff, trying to come after your money, right? So you never want to admit to ownership of that debt. So, and at that point, you want to get off the call. All right, say, well, look, I'll check my finances, I'll check my records and see what I have. Feel free to give me a call in a week while I do my due diligence, or I'll just give you a call back. Okay, so that's a very short, sweet, simple conversation. Now, one thing I will caution you on, just like grandma used to say, just like mom used to say, right? You get more with sugar than you do with salt. Don't be combative with this debt collector at any point in the conversation, okay? Because they deal with negativity all day long. I don't know if you ever worked phones before, but it's a pretty miserable life. And if you're collecting debt, it's even more miserable. And that's probably the only reason why I could consider in my brain and justify why individuals on debt collection calls get so mad, is because they got a lot of pent up issues, right? They've been talking about their mom, cursing them out. It's just a miserable experience. Don't feed into that, right? Because one, if it's a legitimate debt, you're going to need to negotiate it later, and you don't want them taking a bunch of notes saying how much of an ass you've been on the phone, right? So be as nice as you possibly can. There's no point in getting mad, because as soon as you get combative, they're going to start using a whole bunch of passive aggressive language saying, are you being aggressive with me? Like, come on, I really don't need all that drama. You don't even need to go down that road. So be as nice as you possibly can. And then before you hang up, okay, a couple of more questions you want to kind of get out of them. You say, look, I really don't remember what you're talking about. I really don't remember this debt, and I don't happen to remember seeing this on my credit report. Have you reported this yet? And they'll say yes or no, and they'll do some hemming and hawing and look around. Another question you may want to ask is, have you guys sent me anything in writing yet? Because I don't remember seeing anything in writing, right? And at that point, between yes or no or whatever they say on that question, you want to go ahead and get off the phone. Okay. Now is your time to go back and start doing some research on who this company is. Is this a debt that you did have in the past? When was the statute of limitations on this debt, and has it exceeded that amount of time, which you can get straight from your credit report? And now you start to unravel, is this a legitimate claim, or is this some random person trying to call you and get money out of you? Okay. If at any point in time, any of the questions that you ask them to get closer to an understanding of that debt, especially if you're being cordial on the phone, that they get combative, you're probably dealing with a fraudulent debt collection company because they want to collect the debt. Legitimate companies know that they have to disclose certain things to you, and no one should reasonably be expected to pay something simply because they said so. All right, so asking a few questions in a very calm and very nice way should be able to get those things out of the debt collector. Now, once you start realizing more about that debt, the first thing you need to do is start checking your state statutes of limitations, right? Is this a legitimate debt according to the statutes? And that can be sometimes complicated, so you may want to go back to some of our old videos and start, understanding really what that statute of limitations is all about. Because if you don't legally owe it anymore, then there's no point in paying it. And also, if that debt collector isn't telling you that that debt is beyond statutes of limitations, that is also a violation, which is fraud in the methodology of which they're trying to collect, right? If they're trying to collect on you on something that doesn't exist at all, that's in their intent. But if they're trying to collect on something that's beyond statutes, but they don't tell you about it, that's in their methodology. You understand the difference? All right. So also, if they have put this on your credit report, when did it go on the credit report? Because they have to have sent you something in writing according to federal law 5 days from the point of which they put that on the credit report. Also, you want to check your state's laws about notification. For instance, in the state of Florida, before they can contact you by phone, they have to have sent you something in writing 30 days prior to calling you. So understanding the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act at both the state level and at the federal level is going to make you understand whether or not this debt collector is fraudulent in their method or their intent. Okay? Also, you want to pay attention to the dollar amount. It may have been a legitimate debt at some point. You may have owed a particular company money at some point, original creditor. But federal law dictates that they cannot collect fees and interest on top of that amount unless it was in the original contract that you signed with the original creditor or merchant. So getting that information, of course, will determine whether or not there's a violation there. But you may need to get the original contract that you had with that merchant that they happen to be collecting for, right? Then there's the obvious things. If they come in there and they're cursing at you, with a bunch of profanity, obviously they're fraud, right? If they're threatening to throw you in jail, it's fraud. If they're threatening to arrest you, it's fraud. If they're threatening to sue you, okay, it may not be fraud, but if they don't have the ability to sue you directly, it's fraud, okay? Also, they have to be upfront with your information, and of course, they can't call you beyond the hours of 8 in the morning or 9 at night, your time. Okay, these are some very simple things, some more complicated than others, but some very simple things in there that you can determine whether or not this debt collector is legitimate or not. And then from there, you need to decide whether or not the debt is a legitimate debt or not. All right, so hopefully this information helps. If so, give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that every Thursday as we come out with more information, it helps you in your credit restoration process. If you've got questions or comments, put them below. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And most importantly, share the information, right? If you know someone who's going through this problem, their phone is blowing up and they're saying, oh, not answering that phone, right? Share this information with them so that hopefully you can help them make a choice, make a change. Delta.